our house was the center of activity in the beginning because I had to create an organization from just it was a spontaneous movement, and so the organization was created, and a lot of the activities, meetings and so forth, were held at our house. A lot of his conferences certainly were at the house because people started coming from all over the media to cover the story. So he had a lot of interviews scheduled there, and sometimes an interview would be scheduled, and I was waiting lunch for him, and he would walk in late, and of course he would say to them, well, he had to have lunch. Would you like to have lunch with me? Well, I hadn't prepared lunch for anybody extra, so I had to say, oh, just a minute. I'll call you in a few minutes, and then try to find some more food from somewhere. So I learned pretty quickly to have a lot of food on hand. I always have more than what Martin and I could eat. But anyway, after the movement started, it was like, you don't plan any day. It's planned for you almost. And I learned to live with that. But Antioch had prepared me for such change, constant change in my life there. So I continued to adjust to it. It wasn't easy, but it was exciting. It was exciting when the people stood up at 50,000 strong to boycott the buses. I mean, that was so exciting because this had never happened before.
And Rosa Parks was also an extraordinary woman. You got to know her during this period.
Oh yes, Mrs. Parks was a very quiet and dignified person, and was the appropriate person to be the pioneer, because she was such a lady. She was a Southern lady, and I think one of the reasons why the bus driver didn't rough her up, she was so dignified in her carriage, and she was such a lady. How can you hit on Rosa Parks? And so she was a nonviolent in her spirit even then, because she had been to the Highland Folk School, where they did talk about nonviolence, teach us on nonviolent and violence, and so everybody, when they found out it was Mrs. Rosa Parks, everyone was righteously indignant, let's say, because how can you, a very respectable lady like Rosa Parks, you put her in jail like this and treat her this way? So I think she was, again, it was the right person for the moment. And of course, Martin was asked to be the spokesperson. When he came home that evening from the first meeting that was called, and told me that he had been selected to be the spokesperson, and he said, I have 20 minutes to prepare for the most important speech in my whole life, and he was obviously nervous, but he had a way of doing an outline. He did an outline quickly, and he could speak from an outline as well. So
it was exciting, but it was also dangerous, and you had to get used to that.
It was dangerous, and I didn't know how dangerous it was initially, because when we started getting the threats, then I realized, it was dangerous. But I thought that many times they were empty threats. When a caller called and said to my husband, if you don't stop your I don't know what word he used, but whatever, in 3 days, and be out of town in 3 days, we're going to bomb your house and kill your wife and baby. Well, when there was some talk about bombing, supposing they bomb it, I thought, well, nobody's going to bomb the house. If they do, it'll be a hit and run from the back, not on the main street. But when the bomb actually hit, I said, oh, they are for real. And we could have been hurt, we could have been killed even. So, that's when I realized how dangerous it was. And that's when I also had to realize that if I continued with my husband in the struggle, that I too could be killed.
How do you adjust to that? How do you?
Well, again, I turned within, and I did a lot of soul searching and praying, because I know that if we are doing God's work and doing the right thing, that you know, that God would protect us. I had that belief. That was my feeling. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that you may not be, that you may avoid being killed. It means that you could be killed. But you have an inner peace and a satisfaction if you feel that you are doing the right thing and doing what God intends for you to do. Because I remember after the house was bombed, and I had to, because my parents were pulling me, trying to pull me away, and his parents were trying to pull him away. And I knew I wasn't going anywhere. But I had to be polite about it. But I had to come to a peace within myself that I am not going to go anywhere. I'm going to be right here because this is what this is right, what we're called to do. And then I started thinking back over the path that had led me there, from my home training, the threats from my father, and I thought, gosh, my father was threatened in his early years, in my early years. And, it's like maybe I was subconsciously being prepared then because I was fearful for my father. And then I thought about the path to Antioch College and my preparation, and then to Montgomery now. And here I am. And all of a sudden, when Martin said we're going to Montgomery, that's where I want to start my ministry. And I wondered why. And then I said, now I know why. This exciting movement. And this is part of God's plan. And this is what we are supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. There are so many requests and demands, and they're about things that I am interested in, that I care about. And when you've lived as long as I have, you've made a lot of friends and a lot of connections. And sometimes the appearances may be have to do with someone that invited you, that you care about, or it may be an anniversary, it may be a birthday that's a public thing where there's funds being raised, that such as the birthday for Dr. Height. I was there, and I know you were there. It was just something you didn't want to miss. But I also have quite a few speaking engagements that I do over the course of the year, and there's just many other kinds of things that you're invited to do, and causes that you support.
But when do you get to say, I'm going to put my feet up and do what I feel
don't
like
know
doing?
when that will happen. I don't really think that it will happen until I get to that point where I find it almost impossible to get around. And it's like, again, like my good friend and sister Dorothy Height. There's so many things that she still wants to do, and there are things that I still want to do. I have not been able to get around to a lot of the things I really want to do personally, because there's still so many demands in the struggle, and I call upon constantly here at the King Center. So there's been no real retirement. I mean, that's just the fact that I'm not here on a day-to-day basis, and I'm not really making the decisions and have the total responsibility. But I carry the responsibilities despite the fact that I am not here on a day-to-day basis, because, since I founded it, and my kids tease me and say that's my fifth child. And so how can you detach yourself from your child? I had seen the greatest progress made when we were not necessarily where we were unified, but not everybody thinking, the same way. But we had to come together in Montgomery around a goal, around the goals of what that movement was about. And also, there has to be, it seems to me that we have to go back to our roots and realize that we did not get here. We didn't get out of slavery without a lot of prayer. I mean, we are a people, a spiritual people, and we go back to our spiritual roots, and we follow that. And I think we've strayed from that, and because I think in a sense, we and the civil and human rights movement, particularly the civil rights movement, the leadership, has helped to save this nation. And if we're going to fully save it, I think we're going to have to help the nation understand what we have understood.